You know me, I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek, and welcome to episode 17 of the Real Thomas Jefferson. The point of the show is to um, show that Jefferson was accessible, was noble, and that he wasn't a hypocrite, he wasn't a chameleon. And every episode that we do has something to do with real in it. Today, we're going to try to answer the question, and I've invited a Facebook friend and hopefully a friend after that, Rett Longmore, who's an artist, a professional artist, and he's in his studio. And he's going to help us with commentary on some of the various depictions, sculptures, paintings, drawings of Thomas Jefferson, and give us his expertise to help us along. We're trying to answer the question, what did Thomas Jefferson really look like? So before we get started, I'm going to invite Rhett to tell us a little bit about himself, as I should put up a couple of his artworks and start us off. Rhett, tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm excited to participate in this. And like Mark said, my name is Rhett Longmore, and I'm a professional artist. I'm working in right now in Southeast Idaho. But I am a painter and sculptor and animator, and I've been a professional artist for 25, 26 years. But I've always loved ever since I was a child. I grew up in a house with art. My father was a professional painter, full-time landscape painter growing up. So I had that experience at an early age of going to art shows all over the West, and experiencing, being in galleries and art shows and museums, and exposed to a lot of art at an early age. And then against his wishes, I decided to follow that path. And
That's how it always turns out. It's always against someone's wishes. They say, yes, you're talented, and it's a wonderful way. It's not a wonderful way to make a living, but it's a wonderful expression of your talents, but just don't do it for a living.
Yeah, no, exactly. And because he knew it was a tough road to hoe, and it is. And another old artist took me aside one time, and when I said I was going to go to art school and pursue it as a career, he said, "Well, only do it if you can't do anything else. Try other things, and if you can't stomach it, not that you can't physically perform the skills, but if your heart never leaves art, then." So I tried that, and I went to Idaho State University and changed majors 4 or 5 times, tried a few different things, and then eventually I just took a drawing class, and I said, "That's it," and packed my bags and went to art school down in Phoenix at a school that's no longer around. But I had a great education there studying animation, back when animation was kind of hand drawn, still cell drawn. And so school consisted of a lot of figure drawing. And in a lot of ways, it was more like a classical art education. We did sculpture and things like that for the pursuit of animation. But
Okay, I'm going to
sculpture
put
was
up
always
a
my love.
couple. I'm sharing the screen and showing a couple of your sculptures. I
Oh, thank
think you consider yourself more a sculptor, is a sculpturist than a painter. And my favorite is your West African fisherman. And what draws me to this is that it's a very Don Quixote-like figure, but
you.
also very sinewy, proud, almost arrogantly proud and defiant. It's like you look at the physique on the person, it's sinewy, it's tough, it's robust, it's full of energy and pride. And he looks at this mighty fish that he caught. It's almost like, fish, you didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great, I appreciate your take on it, because that's, every time you hear something and describe you almost hate talking about your own art because you don't want to just ruin the take someone else has on it. But I'd spent, from when I was 19 to 21, I spent time living in Cape Verde, West Africa, which is an archipelago off the coast of Senegal. And the way the people that live on those islands, kind of scratch out their existence is through fishing mainly. And I had a lot of time to observe these people, and
And
they
you
just
and when you look at the face of this figure, it is just, it's almost arrogant. It's it's sort of like a malnourished but powerful and muscular, even though malnourished person. Um,
absolutely.
Look at this other one I like a lot. It's called Windy Devil.
Hmm.
Um, and you got a mountain goat, I guess, on
Yeah.
a rock. And again, it's very and I look at, I'm not going to show, but there's your Daniel in the Den of Lions, the female of the species. Your sculptures all seem to be powerful, victorious in some sense, triumphant, whether they're animals or not. And that's my sort of take. There's never a sense, in some sense, I don't see too much vulnerability. They all seem to be triumphant figures, whether human or animal. Am I right to say that, or is it just my own take?
I think it's your own take, but I don't think you're wrong. I don't think it's something that I don't think it's intentional or deliberate on my conscious on my part. You pointed out, and as you were, I can't think of, some sculptors and artists love to render kind of, suffering, fragility, and there's a lot of beauty in that. But maybe that's not my purpose, or not what excites.
No, I only say that because I looked at your Daniel in the Den of Lions, and Daniel's surrounded by two powerful lions, and no fear in his face. And there's no sense in which the lions are worried about Daniel and so forth. Anyways, I just wanted to introduce that. I will, for readers, we're going to go to Thomas Jefferson now, and for readers, listeners who want more on Rett's work, I have a web page that you can access. You can access his work at the end of the show. But for now, what I want to look at is, I'm going to share the screen again, and I want to look at some verbal descriptions of Thomas Jefferson as a figure. And I hope everybody can see that. But I mean, so we'll start off with Isaac Granger, who was a slave of Thomas Jefferson. He writes, Mr. Jefferson was as tall, straight-bodied man as ever you see, right square-shouldered. Nary man in this town walks so straight as my old master. Near a built man as ever was seen in Virginia, a straight-up man, long face, high nose. The last part is interesting, long face, high nose. Marquis de Chastellux, who visited Jefferson in 1782, said, let me describe to you a man not yet 40, tall and with a mild and pleasing countenance, but whose mind and attainments could serve in lieu of all outward graces. He says, I at first found his manner grave and even cold, but I had no sooner spent 2 hours with him than I felt as if we had spent our whole lives together. Now, the sentiment of Jefferson coming across as cold initially is iterated and reiterated by other people. So that's something we do know about him. He came across as a cool figure. Then, as you warmed up to him, if indeed he took a liking to you, presumably, you got along famously. The Duc La Rochefoucauld Liancourt writes, in private life, Mr. Jefferson displays a mild, easy, and obliging temper, though he is somewhat cold and reserved. Now we're talking about maybe some of the mannerisms or psychological aspects, but these things go into works of art as well. When you look at Rett's work, you certainly see psychological aspects, I think, of him through his artwork by looking at the figures that he creates. Samuel Harrison Smith, he says, the stature of Jefferson was lofty and erect, his motions flexible and easy, neither remarkable for nor deficient in grace. Such were his strength and agility that he was accustomed in the society of children to practice feats that few could imitate. William Plummer in 1802, while Jefferson's president, says, a tall, high-boned man. Now, Edmund Bacon, who was the overseer at Monticello, says of Jefferson after 1806, Mr. Jefferson was 6 feet 2.5 inches high, well-proportioned and straight as a gun barrel. He was like a fine horse. He had no surplus flesh, kind of like the fisherman. Huh? His countenance was always mild and pleasant. Sir Augustus John Foster, 1807, when Jefferson's still president, and he's no longer so young. Jefferson was a very tall in body and affected to despise dress. He dressed rather casually, his appearance being very much like that of a tall, large-boned farmer. Francis Few, when I put the ones in red, these are the ones that sort of stick out to me. He's a tall, thin man and not very dignified in his appearance. His face is short and his nose and chin approach each other. His teeth are good. He shows but little of them when he laughs. I think that's really significant. It suggests that he probably doesn't laugh too often. He wasn't a man who had a great sense of humor. His humor was dark. And the fact that he doesn't show his teeth too much, he doesn't belly laugh often. Okay, he stoops very much, but he holds his head high. William Wirt, who was a young friend, says, a strong and sprightly step, the tall and animated and stately figure. Francis Cally Gray is quite tall, 6 feet, 1 or 2 inches, face streaked and speckled with red, light gray eyes. This is important. He was, sort of in the Irish line of sorts. I mean, he had pale complexion, so his face was streaked and he had freckles, speckled with red, light gray eyes. We're going to see some of the paintings that people depict him with dark eyes. White hair, dressed in shows of very thin, soft leather with pointed toes and heels ascending a peak behind, with very short quarters, gray worsted stocking, corduroy small clothes, blue waistcoat, and a coat of stiff, thick cloth made of the wool of his own merinos, were sheep and badly manufactured. The buttons of his coat in small clothes of horn, and a sunder waistcoat flannel bound with red velvet. His figure bony, long, and with broad shoulders, a true Virginian. There's something that says he had broad shoulders. I have a hard time imagining Mr. Jefferson as having broad shoulders. Francis Hall, 1816. Jefferson is in his old age here, his dotage. I found Mr. Jefferson tall in person, but stooping and lean with old age, thus exhibiting that fortunate mode of bodily decay which strips the frame of its most cumbersome parts. In sort, Now, I could go on. There's more here, and maybe I'll put these up in the video, but these are all illustrations of Jefferson past his presidential years. He's in his 60s, past 60s, 70s, and he dies when he's 83. So we have, descriptions of Jefferson as tall, 6'2.5", as bony, sometimes with broad shoulders, but gray eyes. It's not said that he has pale flesh, but we know he had red hair, or reddish hair that turned gray late in life. And what I'm going to do now, and we're going to invite Rett Longmore to walk us through some of these artistic depictions, is look at some various depictions of Thomas Jefferson and ask for his expertise. Okay, I'm trying to get down to the next picture. There's my computer. Here we go. One of the earliest depictions, this was done from a miniature. I'll go to the next slide. Trumbull painted a small painting of the Declaration of Independence, and later in life did a very large, massively large painting of it. But he drew the figures not from memory, but he liked to have pictures people sit for him. So here is the picture of his Declaration, which is very small, smaller than this in actuality. And you can see Jefferson over here handing, the Declaration on Committee of Five, right, to the members of the Congress. And from that, we can see the face and the nose, and he looks rather old here, but we get a young Thomas Jefferson who is 1776. He is 33 at the time. And this is a miniature. Any comments? We can see the reddish hair and the soft, ruddy skin.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is like a miniature or like a cameo. It's hard to know at this time period, hair color and things like that because of the powdered wigs and different things that people were doing in the fashion of the time.
He's wigless here, I can tell.
He is wigless. The artist's given him quite a long neck. If you look at the distance between, where his shoulders kind of start and where his chin is, there's almost half a head of neck, and that's, so he's exaggerating. It's always, I would think that's an exaggeration, an intentional exaggeration at the time, because a lot of the fashion.
For what purpose? Was that commonly done?
Yeah, I think that was kind of commonly done at the time, and we even do it now a little bit. The idea of an elegant neck and a lifted head, especially for a portrait where it's going to be, cropped or a bust. I think that is kind of it's still frequently done, and it does create kind of an elegance to it. And like I said, this is very young. I'm not what we're used to seeing, because he was quite a bit younger than when he was sitting as president and being painted by some
This is
famous.
in the 1780s,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
No, I
he's
think
still a fairly young. He's in his 40s, and he's in Paris, France here.
yeah, and
Um,
darker eyes than were in that description. Which he's got quite dark
yeah.
eyes, but eye color is a thing that it changes quite a bit depending on lighting conditions because our eyes are so reflective of the environment around us. And so we call that a metamerism. That's the adjustment of light or the perception of
Okay.
color based on the reflection of the lighting environment that he's in. So, but yeah, no, I think it's a nice little.
This is perhaps my favorite depiction of Jefferson. I don't know why. I just sort of,
Mhm.
he does another one drawing from the Declaration where he's in the same, but he's got the powdered wig on and he's all dressed up in the fashion of the day. Here, he's dressed as an American here in France. Here's
Mhm.
the Declaration again, and Thomas Sully, and this is sort of uh, not the original picture, but it's sort of clear. But you get here, I've always disliked this one. I couldn't find a
Mhm.
real good picture. I've always felt, here, I don't know about the neck, but the head just seems that the arms seem to be, the head seems to be too small for the body. Is that correct?
Uh, I would say yeah, and it's hard sometimes when somebody's wearing multiple layers of clothing to figure out where the cloth ends and where the shoulders actually. I think he's made the shoulder, and I know some of the descriptions said he was wide shouldered, but I think he's got his shoulders an extra arm width
Where
further
they
out
should
than they
be.
ought to be. And
Yeah.
then there's some other perspective issues with just in general where he looks kind of copied and pasted in the perspective of the like he's drawn him and then tried to add this background. And so the perspective of the pillars, the base of the pillars doesn't match with anything else in the paint. So there's something wrong with I'd have to do a drawing over the top.
Dimensionality.
Yeah,
The,
there's
the
something wrong with the
dimensionality's up.
perspective. Yeah, there's something wrong with the perspective
Yeah.
of and so it
But
makes,
notice the very, very powerful earthy colors here. Nothing
yeah,
but earthy colors.
yeah, it's
Now,
very
I always
warm.
disliked this, and I thought but till I looked at, we're going to get away from Jefferson. I looked at another painting by Sully that just blew me away, and this is not pixelated enough. I just think this is fantastic. Daniel Wadsworth, the hair is almost dancing, and
Oh
if
yeah.
I had better pixelation, um, I love this piece. I don't know why, and it seems to me that this is Sully really at his best. And why couldn't he have done a better job with Thomas Jefferson? I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the time frame was in between these two paintings, but you would almost not even think it was going to be by the same artist. And certainly I've got some pieces that I look back on as an artist, you're like, oh, I'd really like another
Yeah,
take at that. And other times you look at something you did a long time ago and you can't believe you did it. You're like, I did that. I actually like that. And so, part
yeah.
of it.
Same thing with me with writing. Sometimes I look back at something I wrote early on, and sometimes I think, God, that's really bad, and other times hey, it's quite good. And but I
Sure.
mean, the one with here has got to be, Jefferson is in his 60s. Here is his presidential years or beyond. I
Hmm.
didn't put the dates here. I
That's
just a
okay.
little
Yeah.
lazy. Here's Rembrandt Peale. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, we have an old Jefferson, probably in his 70s. I didn't have the dates here, but we can gather from.
Hmm.
Any comments on this?
I think I remember seeing, I think I've seen this. This is one I've seen in person. And I want to, this would have been like at least after his first term of president. I think he had just won his reelection, maybe. How old was he when he won his reelection? I'm not sure.
Oh, it was
Um,
1805, right? He was born in 43, 1743. So he was in his 60s, 62 or something like that. And
okay. Yeah, but definitely, and you can see kind of maybe the rosacea in his face that was described in some of the letters or
right.
some of the verbal descriptions. it is the fur is and the leather of the coat is, I think, is really nicely rendered. Um, Again, the eyes are so much darker than some of the descriptions that you read, so it is interesting. Um,
Right.
that is really interesting. But overall, I mean, it's a nice head. And I think this was he sat for this. I believe this was a from life.
Mm.
So as an artist, you'd always prefer to work, from life whenever possible. And so I don't know how many sittings it was. A lot of times you would sit, and the guy can't sit for, especially an important, the president, he might sit for an hour, and you got to do what you can and then come back and then have him sit again and make corrections. And so it'd be interesting to know how long, or to have a time machine and go back and watch the artist struggle and so forth. But overall I like this one.
Yeah, I do too. It's a believable depiction, right? And
Hmm.
it shows age lines in the face and
Hmm.
rosacea, as you said, even on the nose. And yeah, the more I look at that, and I have pretty good pixelation. Of course, I warned you about this. I'm asking you to do critical commentary on pictures of works of art, and especially when we're doing sculpted pieces, to which will come shortly. That's really an impossible task. Even
Yeah.
paintings are, it's not fair to ask you to do that. But I think it's a fairly interesting thing. We're going to try to answer the question. So this, Rembrandt Peale's picture is something I think I could say is that Thomas Jefferson probably looked a lot like that. This,
Oh,
this,
yeah. Like I said, I know for sure he painted it from life. So,
yeah,
Thomas Jefferson was sitting there, and you can tell from the artist's skill that, he's able to, I'm sure it's pretty accurate.
yeah. And there's a lot of detail there. It's
Oh yeah.
almost,
Yeah. I
yeah,
like the expression on his face too. There's a little, like I said, I think he just won his or won his second election
second
there.
term.
Second term, and he's not outright smiling, but there's some, contentment on his face. I think that
Smugness, maybe.
maybe that I
Yeah.
did have the confidence that things were going relatively well. I'm not the historian, that you are
No,
by any.
I'm not asking for that. I'm just asked just to look at the face and read what the
Yeah.
face tells you. You probably, more than most all people from painting and sculpting. Your fisherman, I mean, when I look back at your fisherman, the face blows me away because I look
Oh,
at
thank
this
you.
sinewy Don Quixote character, and yet there's not there's not any lack of confidence in this guy. It's like the fish didn't have a chance. That's all.
Right.
There's
Yeah. Right.
there's a certain smugness here. I like this. I've never really studied this that closely. Again, we got sort of earthy colors and
Hmm.
a lot of nice and fine detail.
Hmm.
Mather Brown, William Short, who was Thomas Jefferson's secretary, says this was an etude as it has no feature like him. And any
Yeah,
comments on this?
that happens, sometimes. I mean, it's a nice rendering, but I don't get a sense of, it almost feels like an academic exercise, maybe. And I don't know the history behind the painting, but it doesn't seem to capture a lot of life. The kind of dead eyes just staring off into the distance there, which is probably what that might have been, the expression that he had while he was being painted. But you want to.
Yeah, they just not, it doesn't, and I sort of agree with Short, it just doesn't seem to capture. I want to go back to the other picture. Look at the
Yeah.
two eyes. They seem, this one eye maybe seem to be lazy, almost artificial. That's what,
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
go back to this painting. We get the same thing, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
that might have
maybe
been.
Jefferson had a lazy eye.
It could. Yeah. Could very well be, because we've seen a couple
Just
of painters capture that. That's
Yeah, and
interesting.
here we have a softer coloration of eyes. They almost look hazel or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
not my favorite either. But just I noticed the eyes in both.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
this one, Charles Wilson Peale, is almost everyone's universal favorite.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is the one that you would have seen as a high school student in my day, flipping through the book
It's on
of
so many book
presidents,
covers. It's on one of my books.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, when you think of Thomas Jefferson, this is one of the most iconic images I can think of, other than, the nickel or something, yeah, but again, a little bit older in age here, but I like the lighting and the vignette that they've done around it, and um, but you do still see that, that the redness in the cheeks. And
From the artist's perspective, what precisely is a vignette? I use it as a writer in a different sense.
so in a portrait, a lot of times the vignette is, when they say that, is the fading from one thing to another. But specifically in this, it would be, from dark on the edges fading to kind of a light towards the middle, and that can include light or detail. So as we fade to the edges, there's less detail, or it also fades into black, or it could also fade into white, and all that is what we mean by the vignette.
And that's all intentional, so that the focus is all towards the head, the face, right?
Yeah, you'll even see
And,
a full figure painting will sometimes still vignette towards the face. The legs and things are more suggested, as it moves towards the head. So, like,
and we have another possibility suggestion that of a lazy eye again.
a little bit, yeah,
Yeah, where the right eye is off to the side a little bit more, and
yep.
the left eye is not. So that's something I've just never noticed. It's in three of the paintings already, and one could say, well, all three artists just were a little bit lax, or maybe Thomas Jefferson.
Well, and that they were, at the time, these were painted, from live sittings. And another thing to keep in mind, people very few, our faces aren't symmetrical. If we were to bisect it, our left and our right side of our face are quite different. And so, you can see less skilled artists will paint a face, and it will be almost a copy and paste, or a mirror reflection to the other side. And so it never quite looks right, because they don't catch the little idiosyncrasies, like, oh, this left eye is a little larger, bulging out a little bit, or, maybe that left, iris and pupil don't quite focus the same. So I think that's a testament to the skill of some of these artists and how much they're paying attention.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. I mean,
Mhm.
again, we got the lazy eye possibly here. You look at the three expressions of these three. I like the Rembrandt peel. It's a very believable. Looks like it's slightly older than the one which we just looked at, and this is sort of an expression that Jefferson could have had. It seems to me, judging from what I know of his temperament, that he was in general a serious man. He had a sense of humor that he very rarely exhibited it, and it's sort of like mine. It's very dark, Cimmerian, highly inaccessible, almost self-serving, where when he told jokes, he would almost tell them to himself, like I often do, whether anybody else gets it. And I get a kick out of the fact that no one gets it sometimes.
Right.
I think he was the same way, but Peele's is a remarkable work. And it's the expression of the mouth is something that there's warmth here, not too much warmth, but there's almost sort of like friendliness, but smugness at the same time, right?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, I think that there is a softness around the mouth that is, it's nicely rendered. And the expression, to me, I don't so much see the smugness, unless we're going to define smugness as confidence. Maybe that he feels like he sees a little further than everyone else.
Yeah, I don't mean smug. I don't mean smugness in an arrogant sense, but it's sort of like a quiet, let's say, quiet confidence.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there is warmth here, whereas we
Yes.
go back to the other. There's no warmth here. This is just a person who is like, why am I sitting for this painting?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not Thomas Jefferson.
No, that's the expression of my teenager when I try to take a picture of him. And this is, definitely, yeah, there's definitely, like you said, a warmth, and you get the sense of that you're looking at someone with a vision. Um, so yeah, I
That's
think,
what a lot of, even the early Trumbull one, the first one we looked at, you get this depiction to me of Thomas Jefferson, of someone who knows, who's focused. He's always got a certain focus. He's intelligent. You can see the intelligence in the confidence. And here we get what I like about Charles Wilson Peele's is there's a little bit of warmth to this one. This one
mhm.
I could not find any pixelation on this, so I'm sorry for. When I looked
Yeah.
at several pictures of this is the Gilbert Stuart, so maybe we should look at it too long because there's not. But
There's not too much. I mean, but you do get a sense of a continuing likeness. Um, you know, Certain elements you could tell. You could look at it and be like, "Oh, it's that." The chin and other things. But yeah, it's hard to tell without a lot better
pixelation, yeah.
image. Yeah, yeah,
All right, we're going to get to some. Here's Gilbert Stuart's medallion of Thomas Jefferson.
yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic, fantastic piece. It's almost, and it's likely a very good representation, because doing a profile is is much
Why do
easier.
you say that? This profiles is that much easier than doing head on or something?
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, I mean, my method when I sculpt a portrait, when I'm having to sculpt something, a likeness of a specific person, I'll start with the profiles of each side, and I do them independently, like I said, because our faces aren't
Are different.
symmetrical. So I'll sculpt almost a pancake face, very narrow. I'll do the left, and then I'll do the right, and I'll go back and forth, and then I'll start building out the fullness of the widths once I've
Okay.
established the profile on each side. Because I mean, to me, that's one of the best ways to but it really has to look like somebody. When someone's like, this needs to, I just did a sculpture of Martin Luther King Jr. And so that was my method to do that. I had to find photographs that align from the left to the right, and then try to fill out the fullness of the face. So this is
Okay.
probably very accurate, because you can really be detailed
The
and
exception, it looks to me, is the neck. Seems to be almost like a football player's neck, and I sincerely doubt that Jefferson's neck was that thick.
yeah, that's probably an artistic exaggeration. We have these, as an artist, especially if a classically trained artist at the time. A lot of these artists were trained, had gone overseas, and had trained in France at the academy. And so and this was during the neoclassic period. So a lot of things were done according to Greek proportions, which is going to be the
Right.
ideal figure is going to be 8 feet, 8 heads tall, this and this and this. And so there's some liberties taken. I think even George Washington had to make a complaint, or not a complaint, but a specific request at one point that his sculpture not be done with him in a robe, that he wanted to be wearing modern clothing or his military uniform, because that was a tendency too. I think you'll see sculptures of Napoleon,
Yeah, they brought him back and they dressed him up classically.
yeah, as though they were Caesar.
This is perhaps the most famous sculpture is Houdin. You're talking about the Houdin sculpture of Jefferson, of Washington is supposed to be on a horse, but
Hmm.
Houdin does Jefferson, and
Yeah.
this is a very famous piece as well. This is your area here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, obviously he's a famous sculptor, and of the period, and sculpted, so many of the the important people at the time. And this is a marble, and so he would have sculpted this in clay, originally, and then referenced his clay sculpture to create the marble sculpture. So he would have modeled it initially. I think he was pretty well known for using terracotta clay, and I
Mhm.
think I have seen his. He did a Benjamin Franklin as well, and I think I've seen his Benjamin Franklin terracotta still exists. So that was kind of his method. He would sculpt in a terracotta clay, fire it in a kiln to preserve it, and then pursue a marble
Wow.
carving. And Houdin was, I think, he was a court basically sculptor. I mean, raised pretty much in Versailles, and so he had access to all of the most
Right. Jefferson
influential
thought he was the
people of
best
the
in the
time.
world at the time. He might have been. Again, we
Yeah,
probably have a neck too long. Is that right?
probably. It's hard to tell too, sculpture is hard and so is painting, because you're seeing something in two dimensions and you can't walk around it. But yeah, the neck is probably still part of that Greek neoclassic aesthetic. But you'll
Uh,
notice the shoulders aren't nearly as broad as
I was just going to say that. It seems the shoulders are broad, but not like the others, and they're believable. They're proportioned
right.
to the man.
And it
I was
does,
looking
yeah,
at
and it does look like, his neck might be a little, but he might have also had a long neck.
could have, yeah.
Because I've seen
Just
that
wondering.
throughout, but and then they did things, I mean, look the size of the lapel on the coat and the cravat, all those are done to accentuate kind of the to give you like an elegant neck. So,
All right,
um,
we got about 3.5 minutes, and
oh shoot,
here's
we got
the
a
statue. This is done past Jefferson's. I don't know that's going to help us tell us what Jefferson looked like because Jefferson was long dead when this was made at the
yeah.
Jefferson Memorial.
I think there was a life mask made of Jefferson. They would have made a plaster cast of his face at some point. Um, that's probably
He
what he would have referenced, things like that, or other sculpture.
Yeah, and this one looks a little bit to me too broad and too stout for Thomas Jefferson, who would have been
Yeah,
thinner and frailer. But of course, that's what you want. There's
yeah.
another front picture of it, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
It's beautifully
and
done.
it's beautifully sculpted. The expression on the face is definitely. I think we've lost something from what we had in the Houdon and in the painted portraits, like the peel. You've lost the softness, yeah, and maybe a little of
Yeah, for
the.
the presence here, I guess there's a function here, and I want it to be. Let's look. Here's a statue in Ohio.
It's not looking
Looks
very
nothing.
happy.
No, grumpy. You got some bad news. Got some bad press. Read a bad poem in a paper.
Yeah,
Um,
lovely patina though on the sculpture.
mhm.
Really, I love that.
Yeah, I don't know what year this was done. This, of course, looks nothing to nose. Like this, if you didn't know it was Thomas Jefferson, you wouldn't know. I don't know.
No,
This is let me see how much more we have. Just got, three more. Okay. Here's the statue at Monticello. I know this is pretty much done to scale because I stood next to it.
hmm
I'm 5'10", he is 6'2.5", so he's about 4.5 inches taller than me.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite. I think that one's quite nice. I don't know when it was done.
I don't know either. After
But
his death sometime, but
yeah, yeah, but plenty of
two
other
others
reference.
there. Here's one at University of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what he's holding in his hand. I didn't study this, but it's
Maybe
again, this one looks sort of nothing
draft of the
like.
Declaration or something.
Probably that's what I'm guessing, but um, the shoulders are believable. We have a long neck again, but the legs
Yeah,
look a little bit too stout.
yeah, for someone who is 6'2".
I got a
Is
minute. I'm going to look at the last one I have of the statue of Thomas Jefferson in Paris.
mm-hmm.
And what I'll make this comment. I'll let you finish off. It just shows you from two different perspectives. It's almost like two separate statues, just in terms of both have attitude. The one on the right seems stronger from that perspective and stouter, and the one on the left is the same confidence. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you think?
I love the gesture of this one. I like the contrapposto, and by that I mean he's got all of his weight mostly on the one leg, so it creates
Right.
kind of a dynamic uh, contrappostos, the opposition of the torso, the way it rotates. There's a little rotation, so the gesture is really nice, and I like the texture, the way it's loosely modeled.